No pressure. All right. I was going to say something. Oh, yes, these sessions are being recorded, and I'll be able to let you know where you can access those sessions from that you can utilize them even later on back in your church. Um, I'm pretty certain they'll be downloadable. So we will let you know. Pastor Steve will send out an email, but I'm going to try and let you know before the end of session 4. The guys that are posting it are online, and so they'll be able to tell us where you can go and download these sessions with Kevin. All right, how about we give him a hand as he comes and we move through this afternoon? That'll be really good.
Well, thank you. Um, we're about to start the impossible, and that's to teach a session after people have just eaten and sat in a session for 2 hours already. So we'll see how this goes. But this will be fun. Whoa, did I just say goes like Canadian? That was pretty cool. Okay, pick up those things. Thanks for the pastors who put this together for you guys. It's great that you're having a day concentrated on being able to be better communicators of the gospel, regardless with what age you work with. Here's the deal: you never arrive. On Tuesday, I'll leave for Georgia, taking my hot wife with me, leaving all my kids at home, woo, woo, and we're going to go to a conference ourselves, very similar to this one, just to get trained and to learn and to grow and to steal their information so I can teach it. And no, but to learn and to grow, we all need to have a lifestyle of learning. It's important. In fact, I'm going to talk about that later. Today, what we're going to do, this afternoon session, the next 45 minutes, so be thinking of a question or a takeaway. We're going to talk about, we'll start off with just how do you create discipline in the classroom? How do you discipline in the classroom? Then we're going to talk about just some things that I feel raise the level of excellence in our ministries. One of the deals that can hurt us in ministry, especially because we do this week after week after week after week, is we become comfortable with what we're doing week after week after week. And when you become comfortable with things, you start to let things slide. And over time, there are huge problems that are going on, but because you are doing it and you're part of it week after week, you don't notice it. It's like the frog in cold water until you turn the temperature up on that real slowly. The water rises, but the frog doesn't know it. And the water gets hotter, and the water gets hotter, and you can actually boil that frog. You know, you've heard this. You can boil that frog, and that frog will never jump out because it slowly, over time, that water temperature came up to a boiling point, and that frog gets roasted there, which would be a really cool experiment for kids in a children's program. But to illustrate that point, we can become very much that way in the ministries that we lead. So we're going to look at what are some things that make our ministries excellent, what keeps them at that excellent level, and then you guys can sort of compare your ministries and where they're at with that. But let's start off with just creating order in the classroom, really focusing a little bit here on kids' ministries for a few minutes. Because the reason I want to focus on this, I'm asked this question more often than any other question. How do you get kids to behave in your classroom? Well, the number one thing, we'll start here. The number one thing is make it fun, which we've already talked about, so I won't go to that. But if it's boring, if it's not fun, if you're talking like I was talking earlier, and it's just not going, it's just not being funny, unexpected, and new, kids just aren't going to have it, and they don't want to be there. They do that at school all week long. So if you try to create a school environment at church, they're going to not like it. Most kids wake up like me. When I woke up, I wasn't thinking, dude, I am so excited for math class. I woke up going, I am so excited for recess. Okay? And so that was the environment I liked. You know, I liked people and hanging out and having fun. I didn't look forward to taking the tests. By the way, do you know that the recess is an excellent learning environment? Did you know that recess is one of the best learning environments at the school? You know that when you come home and you start interviewing your kids, most of what they'll tell you they learn will come from the playground? I'll illustrate it this way. I wanted to know what is the best kind of environment to teach kids. So I got in my car and I went. Now, this is going to sound a little awkward and weird, but hear me all the way out before you arrest me. I went and parked across the street from a playground. Okay? And I thought, I'm going to watch these kids at recess. Okay? It's okay. I had a big black van and a sliding door. But I wanted to see what kind of environment, because kids love recess. Am I right on that at least? So what's so great about recess, besides it's out of the classroom, that's so fun? Well, here's one of the things, a couple of things that I saw, takeaways before the police showed up. And that was, I'm just joking about the police thing. It was the FBI. But what was amazing is this. Not one time at recess did I see a kid do this. Can I talk? Well, the one kid that did that, they're the one that got beat up. But no. But here's one of the things I did see. Girls would stand in a circle, and one of them would be talking, like animated and like this. And across the circle, another girl was talking. At the same time, that girl was talking. And they're like, and they're like interacting, and then they're like, and it's like, and I'm like going, this is like kids. And they're like talking and talking. You could go ask those girls what they talked about, and they knew all of it. And they were running around the room. So I was on a mission. Brandon Jones, Pastor Time. I'm going to take the recess classroom, or the recess, and try to put it into the classroom. Wasn't the greatest idea ever. But I did learn some things. Kids love to interact with you when you're teaching. So one of the things I did decide to do is when I'm talking or I'm teaching and a kid yells something out or says something, I'm going to acknowledge it as part of my teaching instead of going, be quiet. You don't talk when I'm talking. So I tried this a little bit. Now this is all of experimentation. What I had to tell myself, because I like order, and I'm going to talk about order in a second because there's something about respect. So I'm not saying don't be disrespectful. There's certain times they need to hold their mouths quiet when I'm talking. But what I thought of, here's the lens I decided to look through. I'm going to look through this lens. If they yell out when I'm talking, they're complimenting me. This is what I told myself. Because they like what I'm saying so much, they want to add to it. You ever been hearing someone tell a story and then you want to tell a story? You hear someone tell a story like, dude, I got a story. And you just like are waiting for that story to get over so you can tell your story. You know, and not to one-up them, but just because you love that story that now you want to tell a story. Kids are sitting in children's church or their Sunday school class or your youth group and they're going, oh, I have something to say about that. So I would be telling a story about like, maybe, telling a story about David and Goliath. And David's taking cheese and bread to his brothers. And so maybe I'm telling that story. I'm going, so he's taking cheese and bread, and a kid yells out, McDonald's! I hear that as, you're doing a great job telling the story, and I want to add to it. So I'll go, McDonald's, that's perfect. So he's taking McDonald's, you know, McDonald's isn't in here, but it's like it. McDonald's, he's taking something like McDonald's to the thing. Now, you know what that kid that just shouted out is? He's going like this. Now, I could do this. Don't talk out when I'm talking. You have to find balance in this, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I'm going, hey, he's now going, oh, what else can I say to add to it? What else? And so he brought him up, and maybe I'm telling the part of the story now. Goliath was huge and tall, and David was scared. And he wanted to run. And David probably, maybe that fear of running, thank you, that helps. The fear of running wanted to come in. Another person said, he wet his pants. Well, he didn't wet his pants, but I might have wet my pants. And see, and they're all like, oh, and all of a sudden this story is coming, and they're shouting out. They're saying, we like your story, and we're telling you we like it. That's what they're saying. I had one rule, and I'm not saying take this as your rule. You got to hear that. It worked for me. We had 75 kids walking to church every Sunday from the second highest crime area in Seattle. None of their parents were coming, and they brought knives with them. I mean, this is a huge gang area. Last year, if you were here last year, I told a story about a gang member I led to the Lord. Right in there, he gave me all his guns. This is just a tough area to live. Well, they were walking to church. They are all having problems at school. They're dysfunctional family. It's a horrible environment. This one rule, we could have every kid quiet in the entire room. And that was this one rule. I count to 3, it's quiet. Now, how does that rule work? I go 1, 2, 3, and it's totally quiet. And then you have 75 kids yelling stuff out. McDonald's, Pizza Hut, no, it was bagels and brew, it was, all these things. And you could say, I'd go, okay, great, those are awesome, 1, 2, 3. Just like that, every time. How do you do that? Or my wife, this is my wife, so I'm like this. Yeah, that's me, this is Kevin, I'm louder. This is my wife. So glad you're here today. Thank you for coming. She's just full. And she's a calm person. And the kids are going, ah, and she goes, 1, 2, 3. How does that work? What is it that makes that 1, 2, 3 work? Anybody have an idea? Okay, let's start with expectations. They expected that if I counted to 3, something was going to happen. I installed this lightning machine at the top of the room, and we would really destroy. No. Expectation. Here it is. Yes. I always. I don't think you're getting it. Always follow through with what I said I would do. When I count to 3, if you talk, you leave. No exceptions. The minute I allow an exception, the rule doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying adapt the 1, 2, 3 rule. I'm saying whatever your rules are, enforce them. Enforce them. Enforce them. This is not enforcing them. If you do that again, you're going to be in trouble. If you do that one more time, then they do it. If you do, listen, now I told you, if you do that one more time, there is no rule. I have several kids that like to touch my TV. There's one thing you don't touch in my life, and that's my TV, especially when my soccer is on. And I remember Miera coming up, and she was walking, and her eyes caught this button that says on and off on my TV, and she was walking toward it. And this is how it role-played in my house. Miera, don't touch the TV. Miera, do not touch the TV. Miera! That's it. And then I get up. And she's like, what? I didn't touch it. Hey, here was the rule. My wife talked to me about this. She says, Kevin, you enforce the rule when you move, not when you say it. See, kids learn the rules when you enforce it. I'll give you another example. You can drive 80 kilometers. I'm using kilometers, and I don't even know. How fast is 80 kilometers? Huh? 50 miles? Okay, that's too slow. 120 kilometers. You're going 120 kilometers. Is that like 60? I don't know. You're going 100. Let's just go with it. You're going 120 miles an hour. You're going 120 kilometers an hour, and but the police don't pick you up unless you're going 130 kilometers. You have to be going 10 kilometers over. So how fast does everybody drive? About 129. What we do is we go to the edge of the boundary or as close to the boundary as we can. When on the way up here, I know in Washington the speed limit is 70 miles an hour. I drive 75 because I know they don't pick you up for going 75. My daughter knows I can say it all I want, but when I enforce it is when I stand up. Your students in your classroom know you're going to talk a lot, but the real punishment is to figure out how far can I press this person until they really enforce the rule. And when they enforce the rule, then that's the true boundary. Here, get this. Here's what kids are looking for in your classroom. Enforce true, healthy boundaries. And if you reinforce your healthy boundaries, they will have fun. The first thing they're going to do, though, is try to figure out if those boundaries are rule. So whenever a new kid would come in, I would always practice it. Okay, I'm going to make a bunch of noise. I'm going to count to 3, and then you're quiet. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One kid will always go like this. It was hilarious. They'd always have to test it. Okay? And so I'd go, you're out of here. And then we'd move on. And then I'd always do something really fun after I kicked the kid out. Just to spite him. Because that's the Christian thing to do. No, I'm joking. I remember this time I was doing this, and all often my 5th and 6th graders would test it. But here's the deal: if you create the kind of environment that they want to be at, and you kick them out or whatever your rules are, but you kick them out and they're enforced, they're missing out on the environment they want to be part of. Okay, so I'd kick out one of the kids. Well, one time we were doing something, and I said, "Hey, talk with your neighbors about this," and it's important that you get them to talk. I want you to talk to your neighbors about that. So they're all talking. And I'm sitting up here, and they're talking. I go, okay, we're coming back together. Okay, we're quiet on the count of 3. Here we go. 1, 2. Now, don't do 2.5, 2 3/4. That's a bunch of hogwash. Don't do that. Okay, it's 1, 2, 3. Little girl sitting on the front row. Still silent. This is the little girl that all our churches have them. They come in the cute little dresses. They're the ones that they actually have wings that fly because they're like little angels, and everybody loves them. And you look at them, they have the big blue eyes, and you're just, oh, you're so little cute girl. Well, this is that girl, okay? And she's talking, and she never breaks a rule, never. And I said, here's what everyone knew her talking. In fact, the 5th and 6th grade boys sitting in the back of the row, this was their posture. Here's the other thing. My leaders, who are usually the ones that will go and grab the kid, so I don't have to say it out loud. My leaders will often go grab the kid and remove him if we have to. They are frozen. Yeah. They're like, you can't touch God's anointed. You know? So I have to address this. No exception to the rule. You need to go outside. Then she did that thing that only she can do. This lip right here starts to quiver. And that tears start to come down. And you feel like the biggest jerk in the world. My 5th and 6th graders are in the back going, it applies to them. Yeah! They think it's the greatest thing ever. Because they're always getting kicked out, you know. And okay, so I went and talked to that little girl afterwards. Here's the deal. The Bible is very much that same way. We have tons of grace, tons of compassion, but we enforce the rules without exception. That's what kids are looking for in life. At home, they're just trying to figure out what rules are real and what rules are not. In fact, adults, we do the same thing. I had a couple sitting at my house about 4 weeks ago. You remember I'm online. 4 weeks ago, years ago, and and they were talking to me, and they were having some problems with their marriage, and they were both in second marriages, which is a problem. We're trying to merge it back together. So I'm saying, well, why is this a habit? Why is this happening? And I said, well, tell me about in your previous marriage. What was the problem? And here's what this 30-year-old married lady said. She goes, you know what? I just keep going and doing horrific things because I just want my husband to respond to it. Just like a teenager, just like a child. She just says, I just want to know what I can do and what I can't do. So I'm going out with other men just to see if that throws a fit with him. It's human nature. We're just trying to figure out what are the boundaries in real life here. Well, what are the things they can and cannot do? If you can create real boundaries that you enforce, kids find freedom in that. That's the truth, that we've been set free from the law, but we find we're set free by Jesus Christ, not by the law. We're set free from the law in Jesus Christ. That God is with us. That's where we find true freedom. I don't go out then and break all the rules. I just know what I can and cannot do, and in that I do find true freedom. Your classroom, does it have freedom, or is it really confusing? I sit in some children's churches that start off, it's like filling out the tax code. Seriously, they come in and they go like this. Okay, rule number 1, don't talk when I'm talking. Rule number 2, and they have the kids repeat it, and they try to make it fun. Rules number 2, okay, don't hit your neighbor. Okay, leave your hands to yourself. Rules number 3, we want to keep our feet to ourselves. Okay? Okay, rule number 4, don't get out and go to the bathroom unless it's bathroom time. Okay, rule number 5, And it's like, okay, now rule number 52. It's like, I lost what. And if we have to tell kids not to hit one another, why do we have to have that as a rule? How about rule number 1, have fun. Rule number 2, when I say be quiet, you will be. Okay, let's have a good time. But boy, you talk out of learn, you're out. No exceptions. Do you know what kids loved? The simplicity, yet always enforced rules. ADD kids. They love it. They love it. I took these kids, took a group of kids with me. This one kid's on medicine, he was on Ritalin or something, and very ADD kid, or ADHD kid, I forget, and had problems at school all the time. And we go on this trip for 3 days together. It was a missions trip. They were doing he was a youth, they were doing a vacation Bible school for church. We come home, his mom asked him, what was your favorite thing about being on that trip? He goes, Mom, you know what I loved? I knew what I could do, and I knew what I couldn't do. That was my favorite thing. Those were his words. I didn't even teach this lesson to him. People find freedom in knowing what they can do and enforce it. Okay? Not too many. Is that helpful to you guys? Any questions on that? Let's just do questions right now on discipline in the classroom. Oh, let me think about it, or write it online. Let me do one of the things. I always get asked about special needs kids. What about special needs kids? Because that's growing more and more and more. And that's a great question. I'm going to give you a couple answers here. Hopefully you like them. And that is, number 1, I will not let one kid dictate the environment for 40 kids. So if I have a special needs kid in my classroom, and then I have 40 other kids in my classroom, I'm going to do my best to do it for all of them. But if that one kid continues to make problems within my classroom, I need to find another alternative teaching time for him, but I'm not going to sacrifice the teaching of the 40 for that one. So that's where I start. Even though I want that kid to get a good teaching, and I'm going to have to work extra hard to make it work for them, I won't sacrifice teaching for the 40 effort. Does that make sense at first? Okay, that can seem a little harsh, but I'll do it with the same kid. If I have a kid that keeps coming to my children's church and he will not obey, he keeps going, every time I count to 3, and I kick him out, and I kick him out. I have no problem saying you can't come back next week. Here's why. If I'm creating such an awesome environment, he wants to be here. So he's going to change his attitude or he's not going to come back. I kicked this one kid out. His name was Rocky Davis. I kicked him out of my church. He kept coming, kept causing problems. Couldn't get him to obey the rules. Tough life at home. I got 70 kids here. I can't. He's just not working with the system. So I called Mom and Dad. And I said, he can't come back for, well, first it was a week, then there's a longer story here. Then it was 3 weeks, and then I said, he can't come back anymore. He's causing too many problems. I'm teaching at a university, at a chapel university. This is years and years later. I'm speaking, I get done speaking at the university, talking about self-image and how you have Christ esteem. I get all done talking about that, and this kid walks up to me and goes, you remember me? You look familiar. He goes, I'm the kid you kicked out of children's church. I'm like, I remember you. He goes, yeah, I'm here to be a children's pastor. What do you know? Okay, so again, force your boundaries for the sake of the whole. What I'll do with special needs, sometimes if it's a kid, I had this one boy who had a very special needs. He was autistic. I stuck him up with a table and stuff in the back, and then I would teach, and my kids would participate. And here's what I would say: if you want to, he'd be in the back doing his thing and coloring and all the stuff, and he was listening. And I said, here's the deal: if you want to be a volunteer of mine, though, when you're ready to be a volunteer, you need to come and sit down and raise your hand, just like anybody else. Okay? Otherwise, you sit back there and color on your thing. Boy, he wanted to be involved so bad. When it was time, he'd come in and he would sit down, and boy, he'd be going like this and about to blow up, but he really wanted to be picked. And so sometimes I wouldn't pick him on purpose because I wanted him to be disappointed. I'm like, no, right next to you, yeah, that person, And they're like, he's like, and then he'd throw a fit. And he'd start, Well, then I'd have a teaching time with him later, and I'd go and talk and say, I will never pick you if you're going to throw a fit. I want to pick you. Next week he'd come up, and I told him this ahead of time. I'm not going to pick you, but you better volunteer. I'm going to pick the person beside you, and I'm going to watch how you respond. Okay? He always carried these two little things with him. He'd come and sit down, and I'd go, yes, the person that right there, yeah. And he'd be like, and he went just like this. He went, "Ew!" And I watched that response, instant gratification. I go, oh, and you too. And he's like, yeah! And he comes up, and it was chaotic in front. And I go, okay, go back. And it was awesome. Here's the deal. You can work. You might have to go above and beyond and do a little bit of teaching after class for him. Get that? After class, not during class. After class for him. But or her. You can create that environment. The other thing is you have a real kid with a big special needs. This is going to be a little challenging here, and you want to teach them, and you know of another church that has a special needs ministry about that, tell the mom and dad about that church. They're not leaving the kingdom of God. They may leave your church for the sake of their child, but the kingdom wins. If you have a special needs ministry, or you have people that have a heart for that, dude, advertise. Because right now, that advertising that you have a place for special needs kids in your church, and you really do, people that will work one-on-one with them, oh, there are people staying at home from churches on Sunday because they don't want to be embarrassed for taking their kids to church. But if you advertise we have a place for them, we'll work with them, you got moms and dads that say, we could try that out for our kids. You could reach a lot of people that way. Couple of quick things on as I end here on discipline. Number one, you got to keep the parents involved. So if I would kick a kid out, they knew I was talking to their parents. I learned that the hard way. I kicked this one kid out named named Stuart, not Lou, Stuart. And I'd kick him out, and then the next week I kicked him out again, and then the next week, 3 weeks in a row, I kicked him out so he was in trouble. Well, after 3 weeks, you have to miss a week. So I went up to Lou, his dad, a big Samoan guy, and I said, hey, Lou, just want to let you know your son's been kicked out 3 weeks in a row for talking after I counted to 3, so he's not going to be able to be here next week. And Lou asked me a very good question. He goes, Kevin, why didn't you tell me after a week left? And I gave a really good answer. I don't know. I didn't think of it. He goes, there'll never be a problem again. I don't know what happened at home, but I will tell you, Stuart didn't get kicked out very often. Keep parents engaged in the process. Because really, parents are the number one responsible for the spiritual development of their children, not you. You're just the best tool that they have. But keep them engaged regardless if they're Christian or not. And that's big in the youth world because often your youth will come and they don't even engage in church. Their parents aren't engaged in church at all. That doesn't matter. Talk to them. Talk to the parents. It gives you a great excuse to have an adult conversation with them. Some of my best volunteers at my church were people that they'd have their kids walk to church on Sunday, and then I'd call them up and say, hey, I need this and this and this. Here's what's cool. They know they're sending their kids to your church for free. So you call and say, hey, I need some cookies made. They have this thing that's called guilt, and they will make as many cookies as you want. Leverage that, because they got to drop those cookies off at the church. Leverage that. It's a great tool. Find every little nook and cranny you can and take advantage of it. Does that make sense? And then the last thing on discipline is fight the battles at the right time. If you have boys that are standing up or let's say you want everybody to stand up during worship, and there's one boy that's just sitting down going like this, at that moment, it's not the right time to have the battle with him to have him stand up. Just ignore it. And then after church, say, hey, you know what? I'd really appreciate it if next week, I know this week you didn't feel like it, but one of the things I'm trying to do is create this culture where everybody stands up during worship. And boy, your kid's watching. You just make it hard for me. You're not embarrassing him. You're giving him, in a sense, power. Would you make the right decision for me next time? Don't do it in front of his peers. Do it afterwards, where you have that moment where you can chat. And then just see what happens. That is one little boy. He wouldn't stand up to when we did children's church and we were leading worship. He would never stand up. He'd never participate. And he would sit there, and I just don't make that one of my things. I just don't enforce that. I don't care. If I have you stand up or sit down, your attitude's wrong. You're not worshiping Jesus any better. And you can decide how you feel about that or not. There's not a right or wrong on that. But he was sitting down, and I just decided I'm not going to make a big deal about it. And 2 other kids would sit down because he sat down, and then they wouldn't engage. And I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. But I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach to the 80% to say, let's stand up and sing the song to Jesus. And he was singing, and they would sing and worship, and he would just sit there. And so would two of his buddies. Well, and he would do that for like 7 months. That's how it was going along. Well, one Sunday, I look back in there. We're singing a worship song. I don't know the name of the worship song. We were singing it, and this little boy is like this, standing up, and I'm like, dude, what's he on? Because he is just, he is in worship. What is going on? I went and talked to him afterwards. I go, hey, you had a totally different experience. What's that doing in your life? And he looked at me, and then he started crying, and he goes, my mom and dad are doing this. You know what? That was true worship. Anything else would have just been going through the motions. Dude, I want kids to really have true worship. And at the moment he needed it, he was in the right environment to learn it. Sometimes that's the most important. Okay, any questions on discipline or order in the classroom? Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. When I kick a person out, I'll kick him out for 1 week. Then the next time, if it's 3 weeks in a row, then I kick him out for like a week. And then if that's going on, I'll kick them out. They come back and they're still having problems. I'll kick them out. They can't come back for a month. And then if there's continue to have problems, then at some point, with my lead pastor's involvement in this, we'll say, hey, you can't come back for a designated long period of time. Here's why I'm so harsh on that. And it's really not harsh. It's extended with a lot of grace, and it takes you have to really do a lot of things to get there. For this one child, he pulled a knife on another kid, and that wasn't the first time he had done it. So it was critical. It was for safety and other issues. But here's the basis answer to that question. I will not have one child control my classroom. I will not allow it. Because then everything is ruined because that one kid cannot obey the rules. And it ruins the environment. It ruins the excellence that I'm trying to deliver. And then some kids are missing some of the quality because he's interrupting or he's causing problems, and he can't do that. And I won't let someone hold my classroom hostage. I've tried before, and it's a disaster. And here's what happens. The teacher doesn't have fun. The kids don't have fun. The individual that's holding the classroom, they themselves aren't even having fun. And what I mean by fun is they're not learning, they're not growing, they're not having, it's just, then nobody wants to come. I will not let one child hold the classroom hostage. Yes. It's a great question. What do you do when you have parents that are upset with you for kicking them out of the classroom? Often, if you haven't had very clear, defined, simple rules, when you teach those to the kids, you send papers home with their parents that are communicating those rules as well. So everybody knows the rules. You get your lead pastor on board with you, so he knows the rules. So it's just simple. This is how we work. This is how the culture is at our church. You don't do that when you're in the middle of a crisis. You've been doing that all along. This is what we do. Here's how we handle that there. So when there's a problem now and you're having to deal with a parent who either comes to your church or doesn't, if they don't come to your church, they don't have much to say because their kids just come in and that's just they lose their influence because they're not involved in it. You just say, I'm sorry, this is the way it is, and I really am sorry, and I'm sorry. So you say sorry a lot. With the parents at the church, you engage in conversation with them from the very beginning. Like I needed to talk to Blue a lot earlier. Hey, we're having problems here. Hey, your son's still having problems, or let's say your daughter. I'm picking on a boy. Hey, your daughter's still having problems. We need to figure this out. Here it comes to me, number one. I believe parents are spiritually responsible for their kids. I hold part of that responsibility as a teacher. But parents are number one. Which means if their problem is happening in my church, it's their problem too, not just me. So I engage them in that conversation. I'll have that conversation with them. Okay? Will they get mad at me at some point? They might. Yeah? And I'm going to make sure my lead pastor is supporting me along that way, and we're going to have a lot of conversations. But I'm going to say I want to create this to be a win. I want to create this to be a win, which means if they have a deal, maybe you need to sacrifice Sunday morning and come sit with your kid for a couple of weeks. If you'll do that, I'll work with you. But if they want to engage at that level, they're the ones that are responsible. I don't want to be black and white on the issue because there is room for a little bit of gray. Here's the real, though. I just don't make rules on exceptions. Does that answer the question? But communication, communication, communication. That's key. You're communicating. And if you see a kid that is a big problem in your church, I'm spending too much time on this. If you see a kid that's a problem in your church, but when they're in your church, they're doing great, let mom and dad know. Communicating positive stuff is just as important. I'd go up to Anthony. I stuck him in the corner once and forgot about him. This is a whole other thing. And he fell asleep in the corner. And my leader came up and goes, "Hey, you going to get Anthony out of the corner?" I go, "Who stuck him in the corner?" They go, "You did, like a half hour ago." I'm like, "Dude, I totally forgot about him." Okay. I went over there. He had fallen asleep. I pulled him back. He had gotten an air suction right here. Well, when you get an air suction, you get a hickey. He had a hickey all the way down the floor. That was awkward. So I talked to mom. Yeah, we had to stick him in the corner. Got this hickey right here from the wall. It's this weird thing that we do at this weird church. But here's the deal. Anthony was having like 4 weeks in a row. That was great because Anthony's always in trouble at school. I called Anthony's mom. I just wanted to say, you know what? I love having Anthony at church. You know that no other organization is calling her, thanking her for Anthony being at the church. As a dad, I love it when people brag about my kids. I'll be honest. I even asked my wife when like the kids are coming home from school and stuff. I go, "Hey, did anybody say anything about our kids?" It's just an egomaniac trip I'm on. But I love it when kids brag about my kids. Oh, everyone said Miera's hilarious. Everyone thinks Connor is cute. He looks so cute. You know, I love it when people brag about my kids. Call those parents and just say, "I just want you to know I love you. Mom and dad are going to pick that up. Especially if they don't come to your church. You're probably the only one telling them that." Yep. Yeah. For ADHD, I believe if you have a controlled room that's exciting and fun, they'll thrive in it. Only the reason is because I've experienced it. If you're moving and you're doing things fun and you're not taking your curriculum and reading it like this, they're going to engage with you. Especially if you're allowing them to talk every once in a while, talk once in a while among themselves. If you're telling the story of Jericho and the big wall, have them all stand up and run around, and then have them sit back down. Organized chaos is wonderful, and kids learn it. That's what they do at recess. That's going back to that illustration. I did not see kids sitting down the entire recess just going, "This is awesome." They'd run around, they talk at the same time, they're hitting each other. Allow a little bit of that into your classroom, and those kind of kids are going to flourish. Now, learning disabilities, often I'll have mom and dad, or if they can find someone in the church that will sit with them one-on-one, great. Great. But if it's so far overboard that it starts to ruin the environment, I have to have a talk with that parent. I have to find a better place for them to go where that kid can get ministered to. And it's not really black and white. There's where it's a lot of conversation, a lot of talk, and a lot of grace. But am I coming clear on that? I'm not going to be so. Does that answer that question? I give grace. You get so like that little boy that had autism. Would he make a noise every once in a while after my 1, 2, 3? Yeah, it took him a little bit of time to calm down when we were going crazy. So this is what he would do. He'd go, that's his excited noise. Well, what we created in that culture is when I went to 1, 2, 3, you'd hear this. In the background, a little boy going, but we all accepted that because it wasn't choosing to be disobedient. And the kids are big enough to get that. Okay. So there's where that grace is a little bit. There's where the exception in the rule is a little, though I don't teach the exception, I teach the rule. Good. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Yeah. No. Okay, thank you for letting me. That's a good question because I didn't expound on that. I'll have a leader grab a kid Because I try not to discipline from the front. So like if someone makes if you made a noise, one of my leaders in the back would come and grab you and have you go back outside. They would take you outside and say, "Now listen, we really want you in there. You hear how much fun they're having in there? Do you want to be in there?" Most of the time, 80% of your kids say no, and the 20% that lie that say they don't want to be there, they really do. And so, at least I believe it because we're working so hard to make a fun environment. So you want to get back in there? Here's the deal: we're going to let you go back in. They're only out for like 2 minutes. You go back in there. Now, if you get kicked out the second time today, then you're sitting out here for a little bit longer. And then if you get kicked out a third time in the same session, you're gone for that week and the next week. But I always have a leader out there talking with them. Yeah. If he doesn't come back, um, here's what I find out. Here's what I found because I'd kick kids out for a week. They come back most of the time because they want to be part of it. They want to be part of it. Are you making an environment that they want to be part of, where they feel loved and accepted? Yeah, within boundaries. Within boundaries. And here's what's weird about that. They like to know what's right and wrong. Often the hardest kids, when you establish a boundary and they test it and they test it and they test it, they often will be the ones that will come back later because they're not finding it anywhere else in life. Besides the law, but the law is not extended with love. You have to extend the law of love, but you enforce it black and white. Does that make sense? So every time I tell someone they can't come back next week, let me tell you something. It's ripping the heart out of me. No, I want you to be here. That's what I'll do. I'll role play. I want you to be here so bad. I wish you could be here, but this is what we said, and you broke it. David, I want you to be here next week, but I'm sorry. And because I love you, I'm saying no. Because you need to learn this. That's disciplining in life. You know what? David loves that, even though he doesn't think he loves that. Now here it is. Step back from this. I'm working on chapter maybe 11 in his life. That little enforcing of the truth right there could have a huge impact on chapter 21 in his life. I have to not teach at that moment, but realize when I teach at that moment, I'm teaching to the chapter 22 way down the road. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, the question is, what do you do if you ask a child to leave and they don't want to? They have to. Only one, and if if you know, you will leave with me. And if she doesn't, and if the individual will not leave the classroom, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, you don't want to go there. We'll go get someone to remove the child with two people slowly from the classroom. Here's the deal: are they going to run the classroom, or are you going to run the classroom? I'm going to run the classroom with love. Only one time have I had to call the police because a kid was caught. And this again, this was in the inner city, crazy. I had one time I had to call the police because he wouldn't leave the building, and I said, "You're gone." You're gone, and I'll call the police if I have to. He didn't think I would. Here's the deal. If you say something, I'll call the police if you don't leave. You have to do it. So don't be going, I'm going to call fire down from heaven. Well, that's what my mom and dad says when I'm at home, and they never do it. You know what I'm saying? This is just like, oh. So I have called the police. Now here's what we're doing, and we're on dangerous ground here, just only on this. Most of the time, we don't have to deal with this. Is that right? So these are the exceptions to the exceptions of the rule. But yes, I have done that before. But it's all done, and I maybe have overstated this. It's all understated this. It's all done out of love and compassion. I hated kicking that girl out, little angel girl. I talked to her later. She was crying. I'm sorry. Oh, I forgive you. It created a great opportunity to say, you know what? We all break the Bible's rule when we're not supposed to lie or we lie. And God doesn't turn his back and say, I'll ignore that one. There's a punishment for it, for the wages of sin is death. The gift of God is eternal. You get to experience eternal life because you're sorry for it. Great illustration for her. Had to learn it the hard way, but she got it. Go ahead, another rule. I get more questions about discipline and order and this tough love kind of thing. but it's important. Go ahead. That's a great one. Again, I have to know what are the disobedient noises, or what are or if it's so bad that it just is ruining the classroom, I have to have relationship and a tough talk with that mom and dad. Oh, say again. The question that I'm answering is, what about a child with Tourette's? And again, an exception to the exception of the rule. Okay. With that child, I'm working really hard with mom and dad. I've had a boy. It wasn't that bad with Tourette's, and he would just go boom every once in a while like that. Okay. I had to ask the question, can I live with that in my children's church? It was going to be a moment of interruption, but could I deal with that? With that boy, we did. Every once in a while, he would just go, "Ah!" Just like that. It was just this thing that he had, and we lived with it. And it was okay because all the other kids worked with that environment. It was a distraction every moment. I mean, I'd be teaching, I'd be like, okay, and then I'd keep going, and I had to learn that. You have to answer that question. Can I have this in my environment and move forward, or will it be so destructive it will ruin my teaching moment? Okay? You have to answer that to your own ability. Okay? Then I engage mom and dad with love and compassion and figure it out. Then maybe I have to do it one on one and have. By the way, if you can't find one on one, it's mom and dad's person then to sit down with them. Okay? It's not your responsibility always to find the one on one. It's mom and dad's. I've had mom and dad walk up to me and go, you aren't finding anyone to sit with my child downstairs. No, you're right, I'm not. Have you found anyone? Well, we haven't looked. You should. I go, no, actually, you should. This is your child who we love, and we want to make it accepting for them. But it's really, you need to do this. Especially if we're not trained in this area. Yeah. The question is, what do you do with an adult in the classroom that continually disrupts the class? We had one lady in the church that I remember growing up where she would stand up right in the middle of my dad's messages, stick her hands up like this and go, "Oh, thank you, Jesus! Thank you, Jesus!" I'm just like, what is going on? Now, some people thought it was a spiritual gift. Some people thought it was, just complete rebellion. Honestly, as a 12-year-old, I have no clue what it was. I just knew it was out of order. And I remember sitting at the dinner table and listening to my mom and dad talk about this lady. I mean, she would go off. Um, and she was a little, not everything was connecting up top. That's a nice way of saying it. I'm just being open and honest with you today, so feel free to throw things later. We asked her to be quiet or sit in the back row, and if she kept doing that, she'd have to leave because it was disrupting the church. And that's hard, and yet it's compassionate. Any others?
The last question on there was about plan to protect, and the Canadian churches. I don't know if it's in the U.S., but in Canadian churches, a lot of our churches cannot carry insurance without a plan to protect policy, where the insurance companies require us to have our children protected, and that means you would normally have two children, two workers to every class. All right, and somebody says, well, in a small church, that's difficult to do. Well, I can tell you from experience growing a church from no children to a big children's ministry that the Plan to Protect program has to be one that you put in the forefront of everything you do. All right, and so what that means is there's different ways around getting those two people. All right, and the general rule when my church was small, children's ministry was small, is that we had an adult and a teen worker. But as the ministry grows, we always follows the policy from nursery right through, in fact, to senior youth program, is that no child, no youth, no workers by themselves. All right, and it's very, very important that in protecting our children, that we have that sort of protection. Not only it's important for as you as workers to have that protection and knowing that we have your back because we're dealing with children and from many different walks of life that have come from difficult circumstances and they react in different ways and any one of those children can make an accusation and so, but if you have always have two workers present, it never puts you in a place of vulnerability, and it protects not only you but the life of the church and also the children that you minister to. And so that was in response to a question: what do you do with plan to protect? And very, very important that it be in the forefront. I have I have seen churches where that has been tested, right, by children, by particularly by parents, and you know what? If there's vulnerability, I want you to know that the enemy's going to try a way to disrupt what you're doing with your children, because he doesn't care. He wants to see your church come to nothing, and he wants to steal from you. So we need to protect our children and our workers, and it's very important. And so that's in response to the plan protect question online. Pastor Steve, there was nothing else on that? Okay. One more question.
The last question was, it was a question about autism. And let me wrap everything up in answering this question with this. Do you see how this is a hot topic? Because here's the deal. We all have love and passion for what we're doing, and we want to have safe and great environments. There's just always exceptions to these rules. So let me wrap this whole discussion up, and then we'll talk about being an influencer in the last session of this. For 90% of people, I would even say 98% of people, clear, effective, well-communicated boundaries works. That's what we need to major. That's what you walk away with. 98% of people will operate within clear, reinforced, through love boundaries. And by the way, discipline, when you discipline is an opportunity for growth. That's what discipline is. When I discipline my children, I do it out of love because I know they're going to grow through it. It's not because I'm mad and they have to be punished. If that's discipline, you're missing the point of discipline. Discipline is to say, you broke a rule, but I love you and I want you to grow through this and learn something. I want you to be a better individual from it. When I count to 3, I want you to have the self-control to shut your mouth. And here's why. Because if you don't have the self-control to shut your mouth, when you're doing something else and you're angry at somebody, you won't have the self-control not to punch them. It's that simple. So I'm going to teach you that now because I love you. That's how you enforce discipline. And then with those other 2% of all the other things that we're trying to work with, let's just say this. The Bible says when you lack wisdom, to ask of God and He will give it. And I pray with all of these exceptions to the rule that God will give us wisdom on how to handle it and creative ideas on how to handle it so we can teach the message of God clearly to all who can hear it. Does that sound fair? Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break. I promise we're going to come back at 2 o'clock, at 2:05. We're going to 2:05, and we're going to race like a racehorse through some stuff.